the councillors. This thing keeps reminding me that we're being extreme. First thing I want to raise with the council is, are the councillors happy with the numbers of representatives we have got? So that is 2 iwi and 11 general. So I need to confirm that before we go much further. Otherwise, the world will look totally different. So can I have anyone got any views on that? And please use the emoji this morning, please, everybody, so I can keep you lined up. Does anybody just want to move to that? Councillor Maguire and Councillor Henderson. Turn your mic on, Rob.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with the numbers. I think we really need to keep them reasonably tight, and if we go any higher, it means complications with the Maori seats and what have you. So I think if we stick 11 and 2 is yeah, where I am at.
All right, Councillor Henderson.
Yes, good morning, thank you. I'm actually the opposite view, and I think maybe we do need to look at potentially another couple of councillors. But I also have something that I'd like clarified with regarding the Maori wards. We were going on a figure of around 15,000. I'd like that clarified. Is that the population figure?
No, population is different. I'll get Dale to answer that.
Thank you.
So we're going on a Maori electoral population of just under 15,000, which is 14,970. So it is a population figure.
But it's electoral population, not general population.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Beck.
Yeah, so speaking to the number of councillors, I think in the pre-consultation work, so prior to going out, you know, we gave quite some thought to what, you know, from a workload perspective, from a fair coverage of a district, from the number of different communities of interest and so on, what might be an ideal number going out. And you'll recall in that early work, those early maps modelled by Nicholas and Anton, that we actually looked at everything from, I think, about 6 or 8 councillors through to about 15 or 16. And I think in terms of what worked, I was happy with what we adopted as the initial proposal. That is, you know, going out with a total of 13, 11 and 2. And I'd have to say I'm still in support of that. So having reviewed the submissions that have come in, we've had a very small number suggesting fewer. Most people remain silent, and some, a slightly bigger number than the smaller, said more, 15 or 16. But yeah, I'm not sure of the numbers, but the bulk of people were actually silent on that. Whether you take that as support or indifference, I'm not sure, but I certainly didn't see a big push to increase the numbers, and to do so would, of course, substantially rewrite the whole ward system that we have, or push us to being at large, potentially to be considered again. So I'll certainly speak in support of maintaining the current total numbers, being 11 and 2 now in the new configuration, and I'd be happy to move that.
All right, I'll take that as a mover then. Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to say, yeah, that I support the numbers as they are, but I just want to make a comment. So that's every now and then a nice one pops up in my box somewhere. I don't know how that happens, and it's sometimes not in line with the conversation that's happening. So please disregard that. I don't know why it happens, but yeah, sometimes you might be thinking I might be thinking strange things. So yeah.
I thought you always thought strange things. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Just with regard to the Takiwā, the Māori representation, and no, it's probably not something to consider here, but given that, you know, wherever we land in terms of what that will look like for the two, for those 2 seats or wards or whatever, when would we consider perhaps for the first term from 2022 for the 3 years, the continuation of the Māngai Māori roles in terms of being able to support that larger area around those Māori representatives? So just wanted some clarity on that, please.
Okay, so this council can't basically discuss that. This is not part of this process, but more importantly, we can't affirm that. So that is something that can only be done at the start of each triennial. So we don't have the authority to step over that process. Gayleen?
Oh, that's all I was going to add. At each triennial after the elections, that's when you consider whether you're going to continue with Māngai Māori representatives.
Yeah. All right. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Look, I just wanted to make a comment that I support the numbers as they stand as well, 11 to 2. Now, I know that in terms of a geographical space, it's really, really hard, and I can attest to that for my own ward geographical space alone. But I would really like to see us progress with the mana whenua forums as well to support those councillors in their role. So I look forward to that further discussion.
Yeah, look, that work is underway. I understand from, unless Gavin wants to comment where that is at the moment. I know Sam's been doing a lot of work and his team's been doing a lot of work in this area. Gavin, do you want to comment?
Yeah, if I may, Your Worship. So Sam is doing some more, he's doing some more work on it in terms of working with Waikato Tainui, but also with a number of marae and mana whenua groups as well. And he is having some difficulty around defining how we would cover all the mana whenua groups, and he has sought some advice from Waikato Tainui on that. The second issue is that we haven't addressed yet, and that is the issue around reimbursement or some kind of payment to reflect the time commitment put in by the mana whenua forum members. So that's the other bit that council hasn't discussed yet, and that's fine because I haven't brought that to you yet. But we wanted to get the composition resolved first, and then we need to resolve that second, or at least you need to have a discussion around the second issue as well.
Right, thanks, Gavin. Is there any other speakers to this point? Okay, so look, if there's no other speakers, what I intend on doing is Councillor Beck has actually moved it. I'd like to do a small resolution at this stage. Can we do that, Gayleen, that we affirm those positions? If we sign each of these off, it's dealt with. We don't need to come back to it. So I've got a mover in Councillor Beck that we maintain the number of 2 general and 2 iwi representatives to council. Do I have a second for that proposal? Councillor Maguire's indicated. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'm on a show of hands. All in favour, raise your hands, please. Carried. So that's that one signed off. So we don't need to come back and readdress that issue. Righto. The next one is the Tū Māori Te Waka. How do you say that, Gayleen?
Te Taki Wā.
Te Taki Wā. Yeah, that was it.
So the issue here, Your Worship, is
written down before I could say it.
the issue here is we've come up with an option based on the feedback, even though Waikato Tainui said they hated the thought of splitting hapu and iwi boundaries. They saw it as fairer representation, and we have done work with Shane Solomon around that north-south split, and the other submitters that did submit on this issue supported a north-south split for fairer representation.
Yeah, okay, look, and I think, so everybody understands, and I might have said this before, but for the record, when I went to the consultation with Tainui, and they questioned me about the fairness and equity around the potential for 2 of the iwi to come from potentially one community effectively, and that may be an issue for them. That's when I challenged them, because I had Anton there with me, and I challenged them to draw a line. They wanted to know why we hadn't drawn a line. And I said, for the same reason that you're fearful around drawing a line too. I says it wasn't up to us to do that in case we split different hapu up in a way unintended. So that's why I gave that challenge and that opportunity for them, mainly led by Shane, to work with Anton to come up with. You saw that and made up part of the submission that Tainui presented. Is, are people happy with what they've come up with? Because we don't have an alternative, otherwise it's at large. So that's what we're grappling with. So if everybody was to support their submission in relation to that line, splitting a north and south. So I'll go to Councillor Patterson first.
Yeah, thank you. During the hearings, you would have heard me say that I would follow up just for confirmation from Maratukiri that spoke for Waikato Tainui. Their view was that it was, her reply was that it was, they thought it would be best in the first term to be elected as a whole, and they would work with the two successful candidates on how they would divide that line up. So that's, I'm just relaying that to everybody, because that's what her view was of it, is that they really don't know what's the best option. So they thought by creating a line, it's not what they sort of normally tend to follow. So that their thoughts was elected as a whole, and they would work with the two successful candidates to draw a line on how they're going to work during that first term and how they're going to divide that up or split that up amongst themselves. And maybe next term, if they don't feel that that was the right way, then they would look at dividing it. But that was their view for this next election.
Okay, so that's, I don't know whether that's even feasible to do it that way. I'd probably have to go to Dale, and I don't think you can actually just wake up in 3 years' time without doing a review and just draw a line on the map. Dale? Can you go off mute, Dale? Turn your mic on, Dale.
Oh, that's yes. I mean, you'd have to. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd have to plan in advance to say in 3 years' time we're going to do a representation review, and these are the issues that we wish to cover. So it is quite feasible.
So we could, as long as we identified it now, that we intended on that particular issue to just do a review on that. Because I would loathe for council to have to go through all this again in 3 years' time.
You do have to do the review in total again, so it's not just on one item. Yeah, so you can do the whole, look at the whole thing.
Look. Can I just follow on? Yeah, look, I'm fine with whatever we decide. I just wanted to make sure I relay that that was the understanding that Maratukiri had provided. So like, I don't think anybody wants to go for through another full review in 3 years' time, and maybe they weren't aware that that was the case as well.
Councillor Beck.
Perhaps if Galen wants to add something first.
Galen.
So the discussions, we've had these discussions not just with Marae. So out of the other mana whenua forums, and you would have seen that from the submissions from the Hukanui Development Trust and things like that, they were really concerned about the issue of possibly coming from one community being central, being Ngarawahia. And the only fair way of doing that was causing that north-south split, which would see, and you could still get someone from Huntly and one from Ngarawahia, but you know, at least there is an attempt to make fair representation for the north and the south.
Yeah, it is an attempt to do it.
Yep.
You know, and it did make up their submission.
Yep.
So yeah. And back to you, Councillor Beck.
Yes, I am a little bit torn because Marae did make comments along the lines in person in the oral submission that Councillor Patterson alluded to, and yet the written submission was perhaps slightly more indicative of a split. So I guess I'm hoping for a bit more guidance through this conversation. I don't actually personally have a strong view. I think I'd endorse your comments, Mayor Allen. This is a new role, and we looked actually to iwi to see how they best felt these seats might be effective, and just that guidance is not entirely clear. So I'm hoping that'll come out perhaps from the korero of other councillors today. Thank you.
Look, when it comes to the submission from Tainui versus a Tainui staff member's personal opinion, I'd have to go with the submission. That would be my view, because that's your evidence to base your decision around. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. Just on that very point, I am concerned that we're taking any notice of a conversation that was outside of the hearing. The comments from Eugene, you and I discussed this the other day, that I was concerned about the legality of the process if we take information outside of the hearing and bring it in post-hearing. Also, the likes of what Garding has alluded to is that was discussions that weren't part of the hearing process. So I think we've got to stick with what we heard on the day and not what someone has said post that. And the reality is, you may recall I spoke to Marae tried to get clarification, and I think I come back to the Mayor's point where it's the submission from Tainui itself that we must take cognizance of. So for me, the map is there, and I'm a bit 50-50 at the moment as to one way or the other, because I think we all don't want to tell Maori what's good for them and have been reluctant to put a line in the sand. So if I'll wait to make up my mind yet, but I just think we have to be careful about what evidence we bring into this because of the process. And I think, Dale, you'd probably hopefully agree that you can't take into account matters that have been spoken to after the event. So I'll leave it at that at this stage. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Smith, I just want to say that, yes, I agree with you about having the external conversation, but it isn't exactly in line with her verbal conversation, that her presentation, which is slightly different than what the printed submission was. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Church.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that conversation, yeah, absolutely, definitely mana whenua is their right to assess the next 3 years in the new representation. I think the discussions around a 3-year rollover or a 6-year rollout, they did come up in more than one submission. That will be for the new council to consider, and it will obviously be, I'm sure we'll get feedback from many of our communities based on the ending of our decisions at the moment and where the woods are and how they also work, particularly with mana whenua involved. So I think that we need to keep an open mind, because that's what some of our submitters were asking around, and our growth in our areas, as to making sure that we do what the commissioners say for the last 2, commissioners' reports, and maintain and try to make sure that we
Councillor, can we just deal with the
representation fair?
Representation, please. You're drifting off into other issues. Just stick with the Maori representation. That was
not about representation. What are we talking about?
Maori representation. Stick with that. So, what's your view in relation to what Tainui have actually submitted to us on?
I agree that both their verbal and their written submissions is appropriate for us to consider, and that it's their voice that we should be cognizant of when we're making our deliberations about the North and South.
Okay. Councillor Gibb.
Thanks, Your Worship. So I am concerned about the strong feelings iwi have about splitting hapu. So can I just ask the question about when you were working with Shane Solomon, the line that's been drawn between the North and the South, did he take into account with you trying to avoid splitting the hapu?
Yes, Councillor Gibb, he did. So this is a guide, this map here, and so we've got until the 28th to double check that. And so what needs to happen here is, if you go with the North-South split, we will have to go out to the mana whenua forums to consider a change to the names, a name for each of the North-South. So we're going to double check that and check that no mesh blocks split those marae and hapu areas.
Yes, that's what interested me, how you could get your mesh blocks to fit with the hapu lines because we seem to struggle to do it with our normal wards. So I was just curious about how complicated this had got and the feedback from Mana Whenua, really. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Thompson. Oh, hang on. I want to go back to Anton, please.
I just want to clarify the question that was asked of me was, where is the halfway line? And I used my calculator to find an approximate line where it's half north and half south. So that was the question posed directly to me. I'm not sure what other work happened in the background behind there.
No, that's right. No, that's right, Anton. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. Appreciate the comments by my fellow councillors and support Councillor Ayres, kōrero around the Māori hapu groups moving to the future, but just really supporting what Gayleen has added to the discussion around, working with the other hapu groups that have submitted as well, and that fairer split between the north and south. It's going to be a complicated process regardless of where we go. And I think in the first term of the Māori representation will be one of quite high learning curve. So although I hate to say it, but I actually support the north-south, but we must be very mindful of not splitting the hapu groups. And Anton, I get your, the equal split between the north and the south through a calculator, but so long as we don't use that when it comes to ensuring that hapu groups aren't split if we do go north-south. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Anton again, then Councillor Smith.
The tricky part of that is that they would have to fall within 10% range. So it's going to be a fairly difficult thing to do, and we'll run into this. Do you meet the communities of interest or do you meet the numbers dilemma?
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that Māori have and hapu have their individual rohi, and those, when you look at the maps that come about, they overlap. And we've had Ngāti Wairiri over at Gordonton Way coming across into Ngāti Mahanga. They've got areas that overlap. You've got out at Raglan, we've got the 2 or 3 groups out there with the Papahua and the adjacent blocks. There's some discussion around some overlap there, I believe. We heard something about that during the reserves plan. So it's not going to be actually as easy as what people might think. You can't draw a line between the rohi, which, when in reality, Māori don't see it that way. The Europeans, we've got lines on maps and mesh blocks. It's really easy, but they don't see it that way. So, in my view, you may be seeking something that's impossible, and it's going to be what it is. What Anton's alluded to, the plus or minus 10%. And you will end up splitting the rohi. So, be careful what you ask for, because in trying to achieve it, I think you may also cause more problems. Thanks.
Look, as far as my own feeling on this is, I don't care either way. I'm not worried either way on this thing. But what I have learned on the way through in this process is we got criticised for not creating 2 wards, and the potential of actually not giving fair representation across the district. And hence, in that meeting I went to with Tainui, they criticised us heavily for not actually coming up with a line on the map. That's when I offered them the opportunity to create a line that was in line with their thinking. And what have you done, Frank? Frank, you've done a share the screen. Somebody take that down, please.
Can you do it, Matt?
Somebody correct that,
Yep.
Matt?
Matt's trying.
Well, as long as everybody can still hear me. So the issue for my mind is we've got iwi that are telling us at large is not fair and equitable, and the possibility that everybody, and I would say there's a strong possibility that 2 elected members are likely to come out of the southern part of our district, Huntly and Ngaruawahia. There's probably a fair chance they'll come out of those areas. So you start to think, I know the line that's been drawn by Tainui, realising that Tainui's map was their view of what a line should look like. They submitted, they put it up. Right or wrong, it is their map, not ours. Oh, who's done that again? And I think, for my mind, based off that, you would actually have to go with that, as much as you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because if we go out at large, we'll get accused of not listening to their submission. And those that actually said, you had a map, why didn't you use it? And then you'll have those that'll say the map's lines in the wrong place. So, you know, for my mind, you've got a solid base to say, yes, accept that map. And probably more so than you have it doing it at large. But personally myself, doesn't worry me which way we go.
Alan, could you just give clarity, please? Could you just give clarity from Anton that was it he who drew the line on the map from the 50-50 plus or minus 10, or was it Tainui who came? I get the feeling
Tainui.
It's
I
Anton.
offered Tainui to sit with Anton to do it. Correct, Anton?
Yeah, they asked me to draw the map and the line on the map to show where the halfway mark is, and that's what I provided to them. So they didn't come into the office and sit next to me, or no. It was
but they
just
asked for it.
They just asked for it. Yeah.
So they signed it off effectively by submitting it.
Yes.
Dale.
Yes, thank you for that. The legislation says with the Māori Wars to ensure to the extent that is reasonably practicable that we comply with a plus or minus 10%, but it goes on to say that we must have regard to the boundaries of any existing Maori electoral district and communities of interest and tribal affiliations. So there's some leeway there again, if when we're drawing that line that we to follow hapu boundaries, we can go outside the plus or minus 10% if we can demonstrate that.
Okay, thanks, Dale. Councillor Beck.
Yes, just in response to Councillor Smith, the map appears on page 194 of our earlier open agenda. So the map is in their submission to us, Tainui's submission to us. Where the door is left open is that they continue to talk about informal arrangements as opposed to suggesting that that map be a formal arrangement, and hence the discussion we're having now.
The interesting thing is when Anton and myself were at a meeting with iwi, and you know, we got criticised for not drawing a map to them, and they wanted a map. But the thing is, sometimes when Marae represents Tainui in these forums, she very much gives her view, not necessarily where the tribe is, their position are reached, and that's where it gets clouded sometimes. So I always, in that situation, go back to the written text because that has got their name on it. Councillor Smith, turn your mic on.
Just realised that. Thank you. Can I suggest that in principle, I'm happy to support the split north-south in principle, and further discussion take place with Waikato Tainui and or relevant hapu, so that we can come back with some sort of consensus from them rather than making an arbitrary decision today. But can we agree in principle to split north-south and then come back and make a final decision?
Look, that's probably what I was going to move to next before I go to Galen, is that in principle we accept either way now, and if the way is to split it, that we actually spend the next week or 10 days going back to them and tweaking that line and in line with what they've come up with, and just make sure it does fit as best it can. Galen?
Yeah, just following up on that, Your Worship, yes, it's in principle because we do have to go back and consult on the names.
Yeah.
Anyway, and we need to work with them to make sure that they are comfortable that we haven't split a particular marae off from its community and everything like that. So we fully intended to go out and have consultation with them until the 28th, when you have to do your final proposal.
I'm happy to move that way, sir.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Sedgwick. Is there any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, those all in favour for us going out for a north and south option, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Carried. All right, so we'll go out there, and as part of that, Kayleen, I know the process. We have to go back and consult with them again, so we'll go back and do that and just firm up those boundaries. Yeah. Councillor Lynch, were you playing with dials again, Councillor? Yeah, I can read your lips. All right, thank you, everybody. So that's, do we need to do a recommendation to that effect, Kayleen?
You just did it, Your Worship.
Oh,
So
we did
Councillor
it,
Smith,
yeah.
Councillor Sedgwick. Yep.
Sorry, I know Councillor Lynch has got me all bamboozled now with her waving around.
Councillor Gibb.
Oh, yeah, Councillor
Yes,
Gibb.
Your Worship, I think I understood Councillor Lynch. I think she wanted to know, when you said against, you never gave people the opportunity to raise their hands.
Oh, okay. So you were against, Councillor Lynch?
Can you please call against, because I would like...
Okay, those against? Okay, still carried.
Can you
want
note?
those? Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Rightio, that's settled. Rightio, the next one is the general wards, and this is where I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Beck. He's the one that's done all the graft right up until last night on this. So, Councillor Beck.
I think that's massively overstating my role in this. So
I know it was a team effort, but
I'll start by acknowledging actually that this has been quite a long journey, started by Brendan, Nicholas, Stacey, and of course Anton. And in fact, Anton remains the last man standing in that team. And Gayleen has so ably taken over. So actually the heavy lifting is very much Anton and Gayleen. I just want to acknowledge that, including over this weekend. So what we saw through the weekend is the thoughts, the themes, the submissions inform the 4 maps that were presented to you as part of this report. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. I'm not sure where Anton gets these names from, but we've got, in fact, some maps that reflect what we think we've distilled as the themes coming through. So we've got the initial proposal is still sitting there, so it's our choice whether we wish to support the initial proposal becoming the final proposal. In other words, we feel, having heard the submissions, it still reflects most accurately what we've heard. Or in the alternative, we've got 4, which is really 3 options, but one's got 2 components, Mercer urban or Mercer rural, to consider as an alternative to adopt for the final, if we feel that more closely responds to the submissions raised, or at least it gives us opportunity to discuss which points we want to give effect to, because of course we've got submissions that are diametrically opposed in some issues, so we cannot give effect to every submission. But it's beholden on us to pick the themes that most closely correspond to what we've heard through the submission process. So I'm not sure what the most effective way is in terms of moving forward. Gayleen, perhaps you have a view on this. Perhaps we start with whether it's we feel we want to stick with the initial proposal or consider an alternative. Maybe that's a sensible way to start. Galen, you can nod if you wish. Yes. And if we feel that the initial proposal is not the one we want to adopt, then we can move to consider the alternatives which are presented in this report. That's probably a logical way to move forward.
So basically, the original one is, I look at it as in relation to prior to submissions.
Yes.
Submissions have told us something totally different, which is quite all right. Don't have a problem with that. So I would probably, the first question is, do we stick with the original, or do we support the submitters? And effectively, that's the question that I'll probably couch to everybody.
Yep.
Do we support the submitters? The submitters?
Yes.
Everybody nod. You just need to nod your head will do. Put a thumb up. Okay. So I think if that's the case, I think the original map that we went out to consult on is won't say not relevant any longer, but is not the preferred option.
And if I may, Your Worship, so it's part of our journey, and it's elicited the submissions we've had. So it's been a very useful tool, if you like, to engage with our community. And a bit like the previous discussion we've just had, it's sometimes a lot easier to respond to a proposed map rather than just be given a excuse me, a blank piece of paper. So on that basis, we have 4 maps in front of us, and each will seek to speak to some of the points of submission we've heard. The first being the map called Lion. The Lion map is the one that on page 22 of the agenda, which basically, as you can see there, responds to the splitting of in the centre area of Huntly and Ngarawahia, as in fact do all of the 4 options. The south becoming the southeast becoming a community of interest by itself, as opposed to the ring around the city. Raglan Whangaroa sticking to.
Sorry, Ethel. What about the 3 councillors who've had their hands up for the last 5 minutes?
No, just councillor.
No, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Just button out, please.
So I'm trying to basically lay out what our options are so that we can have a full and frank discussion about our preferences. So I'm not actually stating my own preference. I'm just outlining the options in front of us at this point. And to the north, we'll see that the Ake Ake and Tuakau being together, including the Pocono, as well as protecting that rural voice to the east. So that's and a reduction in the size of the ward. So that's effectively the Lion map. We then move on to Tiger and Jaguar, which are actually the same map other than the treatment of Mercer and some consequent small adjustments elsewhere to fit those 2 scenarios. So this is the one that introduces a large rural ward to the north, separate from Tuakau Pocono. So there's a little island, if you like, of urban in amongst the coast-to-coast rural. In order to accommodate that, to the south, we see the southeastern block now almost double in size. That's a consequence of the north. Tiger is the same, but now sees Mercer in the rural as opposed to in that urban Tuakau Pocono block. Other than that, the maps are very similar. And the final map for your consideration, option 3, if you like, is Swift. And this sees the top now, the northern part of our district now split into smaller areas, which does allow for some more growth. If it's disproportionate to the rest of the district, it still achieves the shrinking of the large east and west rural, but it does have some impact on Raglan in particular, which now becomes, the boundary moves quite a long way north, having still tried to keep together those communities, Glen Murray, Glen Afton, Pukamura, etc., which were previously split. I should say too that all of the 4 options try to keep together the 09 in towns to the north east. So that by way of introduction, Mayor Allen, unless Anton or Galen have some comments to add, that will be the introduction of what's in front of us. And from there, we'll turn to comment and input. Galen and Anton, any comments to add?
Just the one that in all cases we're trying to keep Mercer with 2 mesh blocks across the river intact as much as possible. That was one of the considerations.
Thank you.
Galen? All good. Hey, look, everybody. Firstly, I've got to thank Anton. Anton worked through the weekend along with Galen to get this put together. So they worked their butts off along with Councillor Beck to actually pull this together. So there's a hell of a lot of hours that have gone into since Friday into producing all this and the reports and everything that goes with it. So now, before I open it up to this, I'm going to make a comment. And don't take this the wrong way, but I'm the only one in this room other than staff that's not conflicted here, because I know I've been through this for nearly 20 years, a considerable number of times, and everybody starts to think about me, and me. I would suggest you think about what the submitters said to you, and I've got all the notes here that I took down, and I very much think that some of these options reflect what the submitters said, not what we think. So focus on that, and we might get somewhere. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Having seen these come out last night, I've spoken to the chairpersons of the Whakawhara Community Committee and the Te Kowhai Community Committee and speak with their blessing. And I also go back to a comment that was made in relation to Tainui a few moments ago, that they were concerned about all the representation coming out of one area. So I then flip back to the focus groups, and out of the focus groups we saw, and this was when iwi were not separated into Maori Woods. So there were obvious connections with iwi from Whakawhara through to Ngarawahia and to Taupiri. Both chairs who represent mixed communities, more so at Whakawhara, are of the view that those connections no longer exist to the extent that they are portrayed in the initial presentation work. So there is no definition on these maps, so I can't see where the boundary of Raglan and Newcastle, sorry, Ngarawahia, or whatever it's to be called, Ngarawahia, Newcastle actually comes about. So there was nothing, and I repeat, nothing that I heard during the submissions in relation to Ngarawahia and Newcastle being merged. There was a divorce from Tamahere, but not from linking, and it goes beyond the scope of what I think we presented to the community. And as a result, and having been at the community committee meeting at Te Kowhai last night and talking about the representation review, I speak with some strength that the community will not support any amalgamation with Ngarawahia. There was nothing in the submissions to support that, nothing in the proposal to support that, and the linkages have been taken away because of the move to iwi representation. So I would like to know what where the split is between the proposed Ngarawahia and Newcastle areas are, and I'd like more definition on this map so that we can understand what's been proposed, and I will not comment on other areas because I do not speak as for my own benefit here, Alan, as you well know what my plans are, and therefore I represent the community's views. They are not my own. Thank you.
You know, the interesting thing about this map, I'm looking at, what are we looking at? I'm looking at both Jaguar and Tiger. And I'll tell you what, the interesting thing about this has really startled me on Saturday morning when Anton showed it to me, was there was an original map drawn by the community consultation groups called 7A. This is so, both of those are so much alike to what we've got in these two. It's unbelievable. So
Yes, but you'll appreciate that we had the iwi input and the connectivity, and I accepted that at the time, and so did the community. But now we've moved to iwi representation on Maori wards. The basis for that connectivity no longer exists.
well, it still looks the same, Noel, I'm sorry.
Well, you can do that, and I'm not going to waste time on Alan because I know there'll be an appeal. So,
yeah, but look, I said to you right back at this process, appeals don't worry me because somebody always appeals because they get their knickers in it.
I appreciate that, but I think, you know, listen to what the community is telling you, and this community was asked to be divorced by Tamahiri from it, and now without any submissions in the process, you're now lumping it with Ngaruawahia. Now that is contrary to any submission, and I believe ultra vires to what we're trying to do.
I would disagree with you there. Councillor Willerton.
Thank you. Mine's could be of a similar vein. So the question I have is actually to Dale, and it appears that the desire to meet the electrical officer's multi-ward request is that more important than the overwhelming support for single ward councillors.
So it's the Local Government Commission's recommendations at the last couple of reviews, but council listening to the public and submitters ranks higher than the Local Government Commission recommendations, in my view.
So
and that's where this comes from.
Yeah, so the submissions I've heard almost to a T, and maybe up north might be just a couple were a little bit different. They did query it, but almost everyone else was overwhelmingly saying that they wanted single councillor wards, and so I'm sort of the opinion and in support with Councillor Smith that I didn't hear any support to join those two together, and I believe that we have actually got the mandate to have single councillor wards, and so there, that was my point.
So, Councillor, we currently have 3 wards that have got 2 councillors each, okay? This proposal still has 3 wards with 2 councillors each. I would suggest if you go back with any less than the status quo, you might as well forget any map you've come up with, and they'll draw their own map without consultation with you. I've seen it done, so just be very, very wary around your arguments, everybody. You won't like the consequences. Councillor here.
Thank you.
We'll look at the submissions.
Thank you. Can I also commend the team on the really hard work they've done over the weekend with this? These maps, without a doubt, reflect to me that they have actually listened to the submissions in part. But I am also concerned, like Councillor Smith says, about lack of detail. We really are being asked to make a decision on lines that don't actually give us precise guidance on whether our communities are actually being divided or not. I am a little bit concerned about the lack of detail. That said, the last map, I believe Swift, so it proposes that the Whangaroa ward also go considerably further north than any submission that we've received. There was no submission also that indicated Whangaroa should be pushing further north than anything other than the landing, the Te Akau landing. I also had some other questions.
That was based off the original proposal. So it's still on the table, Councillor. It's got nothing to do with submission. That was our original consultation document.
Yeah, but I do believe the other maps are more reflective of the submissions, but I would like to see more detail, in all honesty.
Look, I suppose, and the 2 things that annoy me the most is people talk about communities that split. So when I look at either Tiger or Jaguar, I currently sit in the Huntly ward. Both of these take me out of the Huntly ward. Did I say that splits my community? Yes, it does split my community. Do I care? No, I don't care. And I think too many people are playing on this thing of splitting communities, and especially splitting communities of interest. And I think you need to all just realise the work that's gone into this, and it'll never be perfect. None of them ever are. But after a year, you forget about them and you move on. So the level of detail that you're wanting, is based around the mesh blocks. It's not about following roads on lines on maps. So you just need to realise that, councillors. Councillor Maguire. Turn your microphone on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Swift is the one that I'm looking at. That's one I would be interested in supporting. The Tiger one is another one that I would support if necessary. And the Jaguar one is, yeah, I don't know whether it's quite what we want, but anyway. But 28, page 28 Swift is the one that I are interested in.
I think you might be struggling to get that one over the line, Councillor. Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I probably, first comment, I probably disagree with Councillor Waterson's comments about the single ward councillors. The majority of those came from the Huntly community that wished to be represented by themselves, and these maps all create that. And so while I'm speaking, I'd just like to say that my support probably, look, I'm generally keen to listen to everybody's comments around all of these options, but I support the Lion map as it has brings Whangaroa back into closer alignment to what currently is, and it doesn't impact so much on the Te Akau ward area. Thank you.
Okay, that's interesting. Is there any other further speakers? Because look, people, we're going to have to settle on something here this morning. You know, Anton's worked his butt off over the weekend to try and get some things aligned here. And we looked at this, and we had a meeting on Saturday morning, and I asked the team to focus on what the submitters had said to us. And this very much reflects what the submitters said to us. And I think some people are thinking about their own view and not about what the submitters said. So and that's what we'll be judged against. Did we listen to our submitters? Did we listen to our community? Councillor Church.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think these are good maps. So thank you for that work. I guess my only comment in terms of the Jaguar, Lion, Swift would be if there's the split the urban and the rural, and whether that's necessary. That in the north, as an example, you could just have 3 councillors in that either the Jaguar or the Tiger type profiles being just 3 councillors at large. That's part of the what's really been happening at the moment already in the north. And personally, from experience, I'd be interested in what Councillor Sedgwick would know and Councillor Henderson around looking after, as a councillor, looking after both an urban and a rural area. Personally, I felt those things have been actually helpful to have a balanced view of things. So my comment would be either of those maps are good. I think it's good about the representation and proportions of the populations. I'm a bit concerned about the Tiger, and probably going back to Councillor Maguire's Tiger and Swift, perhaps about the Tiger, whether down in the around Te Kauwhata, whether it's too high, because we know that Te Kauwhata is going to grow so much, and whether that could be a little bit lower boundary area, just to, we know that what's going to happen there and it was already happening. But either of those maps, I know that Mercer is comfortable either way, whether we're going to land somewhere around Jaguar and Tiger, they're quite comfortable whether they're part of the urban bubble, if they're going to stay with that bubble and not go to consider 3 roaming ward councillors, they're comfortable whether in the urban or a rural. So either from Mercer's point of view, being kept together is the key. So thank you very much for that, is what they're saying. And they're comfortable either way if we're going to have that boundary in there. But I guess I question that boundary. I think it's been really good work also on the old Te Akau ward, where it's such a big ward, and Councillor Ayres done a really good job of navigating it, but it is a huge ward to really get that representation from our rural and be able to go and see them and that. So, any of the designs which flatten that ward out is, I think, going to be much better for the representation for those communities. So I think that's a much better map than we went out for consultation.
Just to your first comment, councillor, around trying to do 3 councillors across the top, I think once again, we discussed that on Saturday morning around the submissions, and there was quite a number of submissions talked about maintaining a rural voice. Now, one of the issues that was raised by Bryce Shirker and Peter Thompson was that they did not want to be connected to an urban area, and they talked about keeping the 4 M's separated from Pokeno and Tuakau. So I think what this map here, looking at it, gives what I consider 3 strong rural wards, effectively, possibly 4 if you look at the bottom of the southeast. But it does give that rural voice, and that was the one hang up around including 3 councils on a belt across the top. The chances are they would all come out of Pokeno and Tuakau and not have a rural view. So that was one of the things, and that was a comment that didn't only come from them, it came from federated farmers, it came from a lot of rural submitters around maintaining a rural voice. So that's why we opted to go that way.
Yeah, and I do, yeah, and Your Worship, I agree with what you've said, but I guess, and I'm not talking about the community boards, but also, you know, the conversations also around this whole representation around linking in with an urban town, you know, through the community boards, and really, you know, we know that the rural areas are also very proportionately they tend to vote higher proportions in their wards, and they tend to have a stronger voice. And in this representation around the community board up in the north, they've had a lot of say around, you know, an urban/rural relationship, which they've wanted. And there's many submissions around wanting to keep that from the rural area as well. So I think I agree with you in some ways, but I guess it's representing the urban rural. I see that both sides of that corner are equally valid depending on how many submitters we get in. But yeah, it's not an easy decision. I think that's 50-50 either way.
Councillor Gibb.
Yes, I just put it out there that the SWIFT map includes Aka over the river into Port Waikato, so I don't support that at all. The other 3 I'm comfortable with. I just probably prefer either Tiger or Jaguar, but I wanted to know about Mercer, and I think Councillor Church said they're happy either way if they're in rural or urban. If anyone has anything else to add to tell us which way if they had a vote, they'd go.
Their issue, councillor, was they've always been at the pivotal point of being split by the mesh blocks. Okay, so in some situations, Koko Road had them in one side of the road, you're in one ward, and on the other side, you're on the other. And that was the same with the national elections as well. So what this has done, both Tiger and Jaguar, I think, one has them in the rural area, one has them connected to Pokeno, I suppose, to the blue area on the map. So they're happy with either, provided they're not split in half. For the
okay, so no one is particularly rural or urban, they just don't want to be split. So I think that the staff and the rest of you who worked on this have done an amazing job to listen to the submitters. I think that pretty much, I mean, we can't get 100%, but pretty much addressed most points. And I'm cognizant of the Tamahere, you know, Tofori or Eureka issue, and I think that has been addressed. So a long way to, I think, getting a good solution, whichever of those 3 apart from SWIFT we choose, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I rather like Jaguar and Tiger too. They seem to be what the submitters were asking for.
Yeah, that's how I think of it too. Councillor Eyre.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I'm sorry if I'm going to ask a question that was previously given the answer to, but can we just get some clarification on the Tiger and Jaguar map? It appears to me that the west-east boundary is the same. Is that correct?
Yes, I think they both those maps are fairly identical. The only
Yeah.
difference is the hip underneath the Pocono Tuakau one is where Mercer
Yeah.
is. Yeah, one
Okay.
moves it one way, one moves it the other way.
Okay, so can I just ask the question, how does that lend itself to the concerns about Glen Murray being split? Have we gone further east to?
Glen Murray's included its
Okay.
entirety.
Can I ask one more question on detail?
Yeah.
And just in respect of the Tiger map, that's obviously, as you say, very similar to the Jaguar, but the Tiger, does that come further on in the proposed Port Waikato word? Does that include Port Tiakau landing in Whangaroa?
No, it doesn't. So if you look at it, yeah, there's another subtle difference actually I hadn't picked up on. So when you look at Tiger versus Jaguar, the Whangaroa ward comes slightly more up around the headlands of the Whangaroa Harbour and comes a little bit closer up towards Wainara, but doesn't include Wainara.
It doesn't include the landing. So
No,
the
it doesn't.
landing on
The boundary
Tiakau
runs up,
landing.
runs up the harbour on both of them.
Okay, so the landing in both all of the maps, other than the Swift, largely will stay with in the proposed Port Waikato boundary.
Yes, will do, as it is now.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Thompson, talk of Whangaroa.
Thank you, Mayor Allen. I'm pretty much along the lines as Councillor Gibb, actually. I find it hard to support the Swift map, but I think that the other three have encompassed what we've had by submitters. And so I'm just looking forward to the rest.
Thank you. Councillor Smith. Oh, no, he's gone.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, just going back to your earlier words when you used Peter Shuker's name and the lack of a rural voice.
Peter Thompson and Bryce Shuker.
Oh, sorry, my apologies, Peter. Okay, so the rural voice, and you talked about federated farmers, the rural voice. So this is where I do not believe, and I don't know, I don't understand why people have convinced themselves that we're listening to the submitters, because no one submitted to put the rural areas of Newcastle into the town of Narrawahia and Taupiri. So I just be careful. Yeah, you can't run with the hares and hunt with the hounds. You can't be selective in what you choose to do. So unless you're consistent, you're asking for problems. So yeah, I'm going to beat this drum right till the end by the looks of things. But in my view, we are not doing what the community, and in the words of Glenn McLennan this morning, he said, I would have put a submission in support of what we were doing, but I didn't think we would do something as silly as that. So the reality is people haven't submitted because they were happy with what was proposed. And this is something that happens all the time, and you know, bad luck. But the reality is the only submission from Newcastle was about the name of the water, but that's superseded because Tamahiri's gone the other way. So go back to the issue is we are not listening to the communities of the rural community, and we are putting rural and a rural ward with town villages with a urban population. Just wrong. Thank you.
All right, heard Councillor Sedgwick.
Thank you, and I'm not going to address Councillor Smith's position there. I am probably by nature a lion or a sorry, not a lion, a jaguar or a tiger. My comment, it's not a question, my comment is that the quality of the representation is what will sink this or enable it to swim very well. And where you have an area, for instance, like the proposed wide rural ward, say in Jaguar or Tiger, that's up to the councillor to establish really good communication lines with both sides of the country, essentially. And I think that the Aka people are probably very happy in their bubble, so to speak, as are the people in the northeast. That's not to say that they don't share similar issues, and they could be a very good united voice. But I'm whether Mercer is rural or urban, I have no opinion, but I am very comfortable with where we've ended, and thank Anton for it.
All right, Councillor Church.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two questions to clarify. On the line map, where is the Mercer, where is that situation? It's just a little bit hard for me to navigate.
I think when you look at, I looked at a more detailed map this morning somewhere in my travels. I think when you look at Jaguar.
No, look at Lion.
Oh, okay. When you look at Lion, Mercer is actually in the Pocono Tuakau ward. It's directly in it. When you look at Jaguar, it sits in the middle. You need to look at that, two of them side by side. One's fatter in the middle than the other. That encompasses.
Yeah, I know the Jaguar and Tiger are similar in terms of where Mercer is. One's rural, one's urban. Just on the Lion one, the first map, the Lion one.
Okay.
There's a little dip, so I just want to make sure that Mercer, if we're going to continue to consider it, where the Mercer is on that one, Anton.
Anton, can you answer that?
Mercer is in the blue area, the Kanuri Waringa, or that instance is not with Pocono and Tuakau in that instance.
Okay, so in the purple, but under Lion, in the purple, but all together.
Not across the river. It doesn't. There's two mesh blocks across the river. That's not included in that.
Okay, so just to
so that's a disadvantage for them. Yes. They've raised that a number of times about both sides of the river.
Yeah, well aware of it. Yeah, because having brought that up for a few times. So okay, just the second question around the Jaguar and the Tiger, and just going back to that discussion around Māori representation. Obviously, over the weekend, since this map's come out, Mercer would not have had to consider it. It's very much in their community committee and the area. High percentage of Māori, it's 50-50 on their community committee. So I guess if you're going to be looking at Waikato Tainoi's feedback and whether this makes much difference to their rohi around that Mercer area, I think that would be something that they would be grateful to be just checking whether they're part of that urban bubble or rural, if we end up landing either on Jaguar or Tiger.
Okay, so that'll be part of the consultation that we'll need to do rather quickly with iwi. Now we've made that decision. So, yeah. Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thank you. I was actually going to speak last, given my...
Well, can I ask you just to hold that? Because I've got a couple of councillors that actually haven't spoken yet.
Yep.
So Councillor Lynch and Councillor McAnally, would you like to have a few words?
I'm quite happy with where you've drawn it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Frank.
Councillor,
hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I endorse Councillor Lynch's comments. We're damned if we do and damned if we don't. There's always someone who's not going to be happy about this lot. Copped a bit of flack, but like water off a duck's back with me. I'm going with what Councillor Lynch is saying.
No. Okay, thank you. Right, I think everybody's had a chance to voice their opinion. And look, as I said at the beginning, not everybody would be happy, but these maps really, really reflect what the submitters said. And I made that clear to the team. You must listen to what the submitters said, because that's what will be measured against. And I knew everybody wouldn't be happy with that, but that is a reality. So, Councillor Beck, because I'm going to straw poll this in a minute.
Yep. Yeah, so I hadn't actually indicated a preference yet. I thought I'd given my involvement in the process. So along with Councillor Sedgwick giving that the sort of elected members overview to this process. There's actually pros and cons in all four maps. Clearly we've worked hard and there are beneficial elements of all of them. although I do acknowledge that Swift, which has not found too much favour in the conversation to date, sorry, Councillor Maguire, probably least adequately responds to the Raglan Whangaroa, I think, and the lower part of Carolyn's ward. So I think the stronger options in front of us are the first three. Personally, I'm very partial to Lion, actually, which I think provides us with good solutions to north, south, and through the centre. But I do also accept the merits of the two options that follow. Picking between the two, if Mercer is indifferent, I'd favour Jaguar on the basis that it probably works slightly better for the bottom end of Port Waikato, top end of Raglan ward. So Lion or Jaguar, I think, would be my preferences. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Eyre.
Right, thank you. Now I've got my details and my ducks in a row. I would like to support the Jaguar map. I can see, just on the basis of numbers alone, when you look at those urban northern areas of Tuakau, Pokeno, your stats basically are going to allow for the growth, as we've heard from submitters, that they're concerned about what's going to happen in the next 2 years as they are growing, and then how fairly and effectively will their representation be. So I think that by dividing those urban areas in the north gives more consideration to those concerns. So my preference would be Jaguar.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Willerton.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. On my preference is Lion. As everyone knows, Lion is king. So yeah, but I do like all three of those first three maps. One of my concerns of the north is the fact that Aka said they wanted to be a Tuakau because of the bridge, and I'm just wondering whether that is going to be of any issue. And then there is the east versus the west, and whether the two combine. But then it is a rural ward, so it does have some support. But that's probably the biggest issue for me in that new setup we've got up there. But like I say, I support Lion. Thank you.
Look, the interesting thing is, and I said to the team the other day, this, and this is such an objective comment in relation to communities of interest, and that's why I've always said it's you bug it if you do and bug it if you don't. But I can tell you now, Otau and Arkark's community of interest isn't Tuakau. It's actually Pukekohe and Waiuku. Why? Because they're on the edge of where they live. They are literally on the edge. Between Waiuku and the rivers are about 4 k's. So, that's their community of interest. It's not Tuakau. So I think what this does is they will be relatively happy because they're with like-minded people across. Doesn't matter whether you're from the east or the west. As a farmer, you are a farmer. Doesn't matter where you are. So you think alike and you act alike. So I think this probably gives them that opportunity. Right, I'm going to go Councillor Willerton, Councillor Patterson, Smith, and then I'm polling.
Yep, thank you. As I said at the start, my first preference is Lion. I still quite like that. But listening to the conversations and hearing that Lion actually has a split for Mercer, which Councillor Church just followed up with. So, yeah, I don't like that split because it's been a problem for a long, long time. So with that in mind, in the conversation that's just been had, I would probably support Jaguar.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
Yes, I have a question, and it may result in a supplementary question. Where in the submissions did it say Narrawahia and Newcastle should be put together? I didn't hear any. So can I hear why everyone is saying submissions are the basis of these new maps? So can we point me to evidence that was mentioned in the hearing, please?
First, I'll go back to my original comment, Councillor. I said right back at the beginning that not everybody would be happy with that. Maybe Councillor Beck might want to answer that.
Well, yeah, I'm not very worried about being happy. I'm asking for the evidence in which these maps are based. There was no submission, in my view, to actually do what you're doing.
Well, there was no submission otherwise either, Councillor.
No, that's therein lies the issue. If you take one out on the submissions, which was Tamahiri, and you leave what's behind. You don't go then just shove it in with someone else. So what is the evidence, please? I'd like that confirmed that there was none.
Well, I don't think there's any evidence the way that you would like to see it either.
I'm sorry, Alan, we'll get into our own personal views. I'm just asking for someone to respond to my question, is whether there was a submission.
Aileen?
Right, Your Worship, it's not the matter that it was a submission. We actually took into account the pre-consultation material as well. So when we reviewed all the themes that you came up with out of the submissions and everything, when Anton modelled these and everything like that, we re-looked at the communities of interest that were identified in the pre-consultation. And in that pre-consultation maps, which was sent out on Sunday night to you all, they had clear linkages to Ngaruawahia. And you can't just say that it was because of iwi that we've taken the iwi voice out, so there's no linkages to Ngaruawahia. There were more than just iwi involved in the focus groups.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the ones that were present, because councillors were excluded, have told me this morning that that was not raised in the
All right, councillor.
All right, I'll wait and see what happens. Thank you.
Okay. Galen, did you want to say something?
No, that was it.
Okay. Look, people, I'm not going to go around the room again. I think unless Councillor Beck's got the final say, I think at this stage, don't really want to go around the room again because we're just going around in circles.
Yeah, to be fair, I wasn't going to add any further commentary. I was just going to ask clarification from Anton in regards to Councillor Patterson's point, because I think it's quite significant, the position of Mercer within the Lion map.
I think we answered that before. So it does split Mercer. It splits it by the river. And therein lies the issue. They've always complained about that. And that's the one fault of that one. It does go back to splitting Mercer. And I think we had a pretty strong representation, and not just the other day. It's always been there. I think it's been there for a long, long time, that argument around them feeling split. So that is the one fault with Lion.
That is correct. I just also alert that the tiger and jaguar maps will have to look at an exemption for being under 110 or under 90% for that ward for both of those options. They're in the representation will be in the mid 80s.
Can I just ask a question, Marilyn, on that?
Yes.
So with that line map taking into account that you'd have to go for exemption for the other, for tiger and jaguar, Anton, and in Council Ayres ward you've got 95%. So could that not pick up a mesh block to bring it into?
Depends on which one you look at.
The others already.
One's at 95,
yeah,
and one's at 90. Oh, gone the wrong way.
108. Yeah.
Jaguar's
so
at 90, 82, and one's at 95.
Yeah. I was just thinking that the numbers would probably be pretty small to just move that mesh block on the other side of the river into one.
Yeah.
It could be looked at, but I think it may, it may be a possibility.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go to Councillor Sedgwick because she's only asked one question this morning.
Thank you very much, and it might clarify things a little. Philosophically, would Mercer rather be rural or urban?
I think their argument wasn't either. It was around being split.
So either of those would suit them?
Either Lion or Jaguar would suit them. If you took Jaguar or Tiger would suit them. If you took Lion, it wouldn't suit them.
Which really means Jaguar and Tiger are interchangeable unless there's a really specific reason they want to be somewhere.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they'll be well represented wherever they are.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Eyre.
Just a comment really to Councillor Smith's concerns. I don't think we can make an assumption that no news is necessarily indicative of satisfaction of the initial proposal. If residents were satisfied with the initial proposal from the Newcastle ward, of course, they could have just likely have submitted in support of that as well. However, we didn't hear that from Newcastle residents. I think probably on numbers, we only had a couple of submissions.
Look, I think, you know, as I said to you earlier, I've been through this a number of times, and I do know what the commissioners will look at, and they'll very much look at what pre-consultation came up with, and this is what the pre-consultation came up. That's why I made the comment this morning that when I look at either Lion or Jaguar, except for separating the rural from the urban, is very, very close to what the community consultation groups came up with, which is quite astonished me, to be honest. And that's where they will take their answers from. Not from what we think. They'll take it from the submissions and from what pre-consultation said. Is that a fair comment, Dale? Yeah. Okay. So look, what I'm going to do, I'm going to straw poll us because there's only probably 3 that have had a reasonable sniff at this. So what I'll do is I'll straw poll it, and I'll just take an indication of hands before we go any further. So the 3 I've got down here, I've got Tiger, Lion, and Jaguar. So I'm gonna start off with Lion first. So those that might support Lion, please raise a hand. I've got 2. Those that support Jaguar, please raise a hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Don't move around, everybody. I'll lose you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5. What did I just say? Jaguar.
Yes.
Yeah. Tiger.
Tiger.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Jesus, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Can I ask for a division then, or everyone?
Yeah, look, it might be easy if I do a division here. Everybody take your emojis down, please. I'm going to use the emojis.
Your worship.
Yes.
If we accept that that Lion is likely to fail, perhaps if we just narrow it to Tiger and Jaguar.
So Lion is going to fail anyway, so I'll take Lion out. So it's just between Lion and Tiger. So I'll ask you all to use your emojis. So I've got written down here, I'll start off with the Tiger, saying it's the first one on a bit of paper. So those in favour of Tiger, please put up your emoji.
So I'm going to put my emoji up for both.
You can only do one.
I like both.
Just do one, please.
God.
Okay. So I got 1, 2, 3.
Wait.
Yeah, all right. I'll wait for the emoji.
It's up.
Okay.
It's up.
I got 5 emojis. Any more emojis on Tiger? Righto.
Was that Tiger, your worship, or Jaguar?
No, that was Tiger.
Okay.
Jaguar. Right, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
You've got Frankie on the bottom.
7, 8. I make 9. I think that's the decision, isn't it? Councillor Lynch, are you there? 10. How can I have 10 and 5?
You can't.
Can't. But I'd say no matter which way it is, it's Jaguar is the chosen one.
Can I just record my vote against both?
That's quite all right, councillor.
And we'll wait for the commission to make a determination.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure I know which way they'll go based on past experience. All right. Councillor Sedgwick, did you want to say something? Your emoji's up. So, Galen, where are you? I've lost you again. Oh, there you are.
I'm here, but I need a mover and a seconder for that, your worship, and then mover to Councillor Thompson.
Seconder, Councillor Church. You happy to second it? Councillor Church is second it. No further discussion. I'll put it on a show of hands, please.
I'll move an amendment that Newcastle and Narrawahi be divorced, separated.
All right. Do you have a seconder?
Councillor Willerton.
Okay, if that's the case, I'm not going to have any speaking rights. So this is going to be purely on a show of hands. Those that support the amendment that Ngaruawahia and Newcastle be split, which I must inform you can't be unless you actually alter everything else. That's the downside of this. That's the bit I didn't tell you before.
No,
So it's not, because it is
it's a 2 councillor ward, so you can split it.
It still can't be split in the way you think it can be. I'm sorry. So with that, all those supporting it, please raise a hand.
4.
That's 4 opposed. Lost. Can we go back to the original recommendation that our preferred option is Jaguar? I have a mover and a seconder in that.
You've got Thompson and Church being the substantive motion now, Your Worship.
That's right. So that's what I'm going on. So on a show of hands, all in favour, show of hands, please. Carried. So
can we just do the process and ask for against, please?
Those against? 1. Councillor Smith, and recorded, please.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to give you all a break before we get into the community board stuff, because it's up past, as I said, we do. I don't think the community board one will take too long, but we still need to have a break. So I'll see you back in 20 minutes. Tony, are you there? I'll ring you.